Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon or good evening, depending where you are in the world. Your Excellencies and dear colleagues and friends, my name is Francesco Mancini. I'm a Vice Dean for Executive Education and Associate Professor in Practice here at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore. And it's given me a great pleasure to chair this roundtable discussion in the occasion of the 30th anniversary of independence of the Republic of Kazakhstan. And I want, first of all, to thank very much the Embassy of Kazakhstan in Singapore and His Excellency Ambassador Arken Aristanov for this opportunity. So thank you very much, Ambassador. I also want to thank His Excellency Ambassador Zulkifli Bararuddin, Singapore Ambassador to the Republic of Kazakhstan, for honoring us with his presence at this roundtable. Many thanks, Ambassador, for joining us today. I will introduce our speakers later, as well as pass the floor to Ambassador Aristanov for his opening remarks, but allow me to add my own congratulations and best wishes to the Republic of Kazakhstan in the occasion of the 30th anniversary of independence. The last 30 years have been an extraordinary journey for Kazakhstan, which has developed to become the most industrialized economy of Central Asia, and also a diplomatic leader, not only in its region, but also globally, keeping very productive relationship with the East and the West of the world. I've been in Nur Sultan many times. I look forward to be able to come again. And it has not escaped my attention that every time I come, I've seen new developments and new initiatives. From the very first time I came in 2017 with the Expo, to the creation of a new massive university campus in just 10 years, the Nazarbayev University. And since I'm in academia, allow me to say a word on education, because this is something that keeps both Singapore and Kazakhstan together, which is a primary focus on the role of education as an element of growth. And this is not just me saying it. Actually, President Tokayev, in his State of the Union address in August, mentioned the importance of education in the very first paragraph of his speech. And so I wanted to acknowledge our partnership with the Nazarbayev University in the past 10 years. We've been working with the Graduate School of Public Policy in Nur Sultan since its inception, and we've been honored for this relationship and also very impressed by the success of the school in such a short time, in many ways mirroring the story of the Lee Kuan Yew School. If you allow me, I also want to mention that on 15 and 16 October, our school is partnering with the Nazarbayev University Graduate School of Public Policy in hosting a conference with a series of panel sessions and roundtable discussion on policy change and structural reforms in Eurasia. It will be another occasion to continue the conversation that we're having today, and you can register as the conference will also be available online. Now, with that said, allow me to give the floor now to Ambassador Arken Aristanov, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Kazakhstan to Singapore, for his opening remarks. Ambassador, thank you again for this opportunity. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Francesco. I'm glad and honored to meet all of you today, though it's online. And Your Excellency, Zulkifli Bararuddin, you participate in our online conference from Germany, and thank you for this. Ladies and gentlemen, this year Kazakhstan celebrates the 30th anniversary of independence. And today's roundtable discussion is dedicated to this significant event. And almost 3 decades, Kazakhstan has managed to become an economic and geopolitical success story. The country has also illustrated its willingness to be a trustworthy partner in a region that faces many challenges. Kazakhstan has a special geographic location with an area of 2.7 million kilometers, equivalent of size of Western Europe. Kazakhstan is the 9th largest country landlocked in the world. With such a huge territory and rich history, it's no wonder that Kazakhstan is one of the most diverse countries on the earth, with population only 19 million. Historically, Kazakhstan acted as a bridge between Europe and Asia. The Great Steppe was such an important and influential political actor that very often changed the development of history in Europe and Asia. As we make progress on reviving the ancient Silk Way, our country is well placed to become a vital trading link between China and Europe. Agriculturally, Kazakhstan is also known as a motherland of apples and tulips. And today in Singapore, from 8 October till 14th November, together with Garden by the Bay, we organized the exhibition Tulip Mania 2021. And as Professor Francesco Mancini told that he wants to visit Kazakhstan, so we invite you to visit Garden by the Bay, and you will see Turkestan, you will see Nur Sultan, you will see some flowers from Kazakhstan. And originally, tulips are from the footsteps of Tian Shan mountains, and then transferred to Ottoman Empire, then to Austria, and from Austria to Netherlands. And this is the long history. And all the things you will learn if you're visiting this exhibition. Kazakhstan also is rich in mineral resources. The country holds a gigantic wealth of oil with reserve of estimated 30 billion barrels. And we are among top 10 producers of oil and gas, and the biggest exporter of uranium. Kazakhstan has the most explored reserves of zinc, silver, copper, molybdenum, and gold. But this does not mean that we are limiting ourselves to extracting sector. The state has successful long-term program of industrial and innovative development designed to modernize and diversify the economy. Special attention is given to the development of small and medium-sized enterprises, and GDP input from which is about 30%. Since Kazakhstan gained independence in 1991, GDP per capita has increased by more than 1,500%, from 700 to 11,000 US dollars. The country is also the upper middle income group of countries according to the World Bank classification. In its 30th independence, Kazakhstan has attracted more than 350 billion of US dollar of foreign investment, around 70% of the total volume of investment attracted to the Central Asia. The country's gold and currency reserves amount to 35 billion of US dollar. And Kazakhstan is currently implementing the new Great Silk Way, a large-scale project which aims to revive the country's historical role as a connecting link in the continent. It will transform Kazakhstan into the largest business and transit hub of the region, a bridge between Europe and Asia. During the years of independence, we built our new capital, Nur Sultan city, with wide avenues and unusual buildings, built from scratch on the left bank of the Ishim River. Named as the Singapore of the steppes by the British Lonely Planet, Nur Sultan is the first introduction to Kazakhstan for many travelers. The world's youngest capital has already reinvented itself as one of the most innovative cities. It became a popular venue for international brands to shoot advertisements. Many architectural masterpieces include Han Shatir, the largest tent-shaped building in the world, Nur Alem Museum of Future Energy in the form of a sphere, the snow-white Hazret Sultan Mosque, the largest mosque in Central Asia, the Palace of Peace and the Reconciliation in the form of sparkling pyramid, and last but not least, Astana Opera and Astana Ballet theaters, multi-genre repertoires of which are constantly enriched with masterpieces of world classics and modern performances. Since gaining independence, Kazakhstan has demonstrated its commitment to multilateralism, global peace building, security and development, as well as efficiency as an imperial honest broker working for the common benefit. By initiative of the first president, Nursultan Nazarbayev, the country has launched important international process, including the Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia, Congress of Leaders of World and Traditional Religions. Kazakhstan has also chaired key institutions such as the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Kazakhstan is the founding member of Eurasian Economic Union. and the 1st October 2019, Eurasian Economic Union and Singapore signed the free trade agreement. This year, we celebrate 30th anniversary of our independence, and addressing the Kazakhstan nation on the eve of 30th anniversary, President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev noted, independence serves as a strong pillar of Kazakhstan's statehood. For Kazakhstan, a country with a rich history and deep roots, there is no greater value. It is the most precious treasure for our nation. During the joint session of the chambers of Kazakhstan Parliament on September 2021, President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev addressed a message to the people of the country about the new political agenda and the priority goals of the socio-economic development of the country for the coming period. In particular, he noted that the creation of a truly diversified technological economy is not just a necessity for us. This path is already without alternative. And at the same time, economy is obliged to work to improve the welfare of people. The global COVID crisis has increased the pressure on the incomes of the population. Therefore, since 2020, the salaries of teachers, doctors, social workers have increased in Kazakhstan. From 2022, the minimum wage will be increased from the current 42,000 to 60,000 tenge. The wage of public sector employees will increase by 20% annually from 2022 to 2025. In the new digital era, digitalization will have a geopolitical significance. Kazakhstan should become a central digital hub in a significant part of the Eurasian region. Transfers of modern digital technologies, the introduction of elements of Industry 4.0 are extremely important for Kazakhstan. Due to the low public debt and the presence of the significant reserves, Kazakhstan is relatively successfully overcoming the consequences of the pandemic. At the same time, the country needs a set of rules for managing public finances, public debt, budget policy, and the national fund. Mr. Tokayev is continuing in exercising the country's new course of economic, social, and political modernization and development, the 2050 strategy, a bold, innovative strategy of universal economic pragmatism, designed to make Kazakhstan one of the world's top 30 most developed states by 2050. The Kazakhstan 2050 strategy, led by first President Nursultan Nazarbayev, implements 7 long-term priorities to be among the top 30 global economies through sustainable domestic development, political cooperation with peace and prosperity-seeking nations, digitalization, civil and social modernization, and national pride. I hope that today's discussions will open more issues that we can discuss together. And I wish everybody a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your words. We are now opening to a panel conversation, and we are very lucky to have 3 speakers with us who are also have deep knowledge of Kazakhstan and the region as well. Let me just briefly introduce them to you. We will then open after their presentation, we'll then open to questions. And as you all know, Zoom, so you have at the right bottom of your Zoom a Q&A, and I will ask you please to type your questions there. First of all, we have Ambassador Zulkifli Bahrudin here with us, who is Singapore ambassador to the Republic of Kazakhstan. Thank you, Ambassador, for being with us. Is joining the panel also Associate Professor Bhaskaran Nair and Associate Professor Eduardo Araral. Happen they are both colleagues of mine. Currently, Professor Bhaskaran is a visiting professor in Nazarbayev University, the Graduate School of Public Policy, while Professor Eduardo Araral is an associate professor and co-director of the Institute of Water Policy at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and is currently on a sabbatical in in Stanford University, hence his background, as you can see in the back. Both professor has deep knowledge of Kazakhstan and Central Asia. They've been teaching in the region as well as published a lot on this topic. So thank you very much for joining us. Ambassador Bahrudin, I think you have the floor now. I'm happy to pass you the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. First, I will start by offering my congratulations to my dear friend, Mr. Arkan and Kazakhstan on the anniversary of the 30th independence of Republic of Kazakhstan. I'll start by saying that when I look back at Kazakhstan, which is 30 years old now, there are a few things that I think we should be aware of when comparing with Singapore. And number one, I think Kazakhstan is a very blessed country. In 30 years, it has experienced or gone through a period of stability, peace, economic and social progress, and prosperity. And if you compare that with many countries we see around the region in the last 30 years, even Singapore, I think Kazakhstan was blessed with the kind of progress that it has made, and very much escaped many of the problems that many emerging countries face in their initial years of their lives. Compared to Singapore, Singapore was founded on very difficult circumstances that until today remain a very important reminder and lessons for us that these fissures can become a huge challenge for us in the future. So I'm not saying that Kazakhstan do not, I think it's as far as Kazakhstan is concerned, I think its best time will be ahead of it. It's got great years ahead, and so has best challenges. But nevertheless, I would think Kazakhs and Kazakhstan have a lot to be proud of in the last 30 years that, and we should congratulate for them. Secondly, I think these things do not also come just by nature. I think there were very important choices that were made, choices that we should remember, the choices that the elders, the founders of Kazakhstan decided was very important to make the country relevant, not only regionally, but globally. So it's not just a wish list, but it's something that they have earned, Kazakhstan has earned, and they have made very important contribution and sacrifices. For example, on the founding of Kazakhstan, the first president Nazarbayev decided, despite the fact that he inherited a huge, among the largest nuclear arsenal on earth, he decided on the very first day that Kazakhstan must denuclearize and not be a nuclear power. I think that's a very, very, very important decision that we must take note of. And until today, I would say the denuclearization policy of Kazakhstan on the founding of its independence is one of the key important moments in history that I think all of us should be thankful for Kazakhstan, including Singapore. I think we also share common interest in it. And thirdly, I think because of the two things I mentioned, blessed, it had made very important contributions to the world. I think also important, let's not forget the Kazakh people are united in their desire to pursue a very long-term, peaceful interest, huge ambitions, and I admire the appetite to continuously learn from the best in the world. I think these three things are important for us to also learn from Kazakhstan. I think in Singapore, I always, each time I come back from Nur Sultan, remind myself that Singapore too needs to be as equally conscious of the need to learn and equally need to be pioneering and adventurous in our outlook. So I think this is, I thought on, after 30 years, there are many lessons that we can learn. I will also touch on two things which are actually important for Singapore-Kazakhstan bilateral relations. Although it was first, the foundation was placed by both our leaders, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew and First President Nazarbayev, who struck a very strong personal relationship. But I think this is where their personal relationship went beyond personalities. They could bring their respective countries to take advantage of their personal ties and build it into economic goodwill, and now to economic opportunities and political strength. So the two leaders did a lot of things so that we are today inheriting from a lot of the things that they have developed. And to think that they are miles apart, there's very little contact and familiarity, but two great leaders could do a lot of things to bring two countries together from two vastly different regions. And I think I must also mention a little point that many people may not know about, and that President Tokayev spent many years in Singapore as a diplomat. And again, he, in my time that I was fortunate to have known him when he has hosted very senior personalities from Singapore, it's quite clear that his time spent in Singapore is a great help to Singapore and Kazakhstan bilateral relations. And I think we should take advantage of that, both economically, politically, and people to people, because that strong political relationship between Nazarbayev, First President, and Lee Kuan Yew continues today with President Tokayev and some of our senior leaders in Singapore who have made visits. I think we have great political exchanges and visits between these two countries. But it's not just personalities. I think I would like to emphasize that Singapore too and Kazakhstan have placed a solid foundation on these political ties that we have developed and nurtured over the years, hoping that it will turn into economic and commercial opportunities. And therefore, we place a great emphasis on the Eurasian Economic Union, FTA, that we have between our countries in the region. It's a gateway for Singapore to the region, not just now, but in future as we start to pioneer further afield. But it's also important that for Kazakhstan to find its way here through Singapore. I think this is something we can take advantage of. And at the governmental level also, we have also placed other institutions in place. For example, the universities, Nazarbayev University and Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy is just one example. But there are many other examples we are working on in terms of anti-corruption, in terms of our mutual respect and support of protocols of United Nations resolutions and bilateral interests must continue. And I think many of these good things are not so clear to Singaporeans, but they are extremely important for a small country to build global international network with good friends like Kazakhstan. And for that, I'm very, very grateful for this. Singapore needs friends around the region, and these are the kind of structures that has been responsible to make Singapore progress and successful. However, I would also like to state that while we have done very well in this front, it is important, like I say, that we continue to nurture the private sector and the other public sectors to continue this good work, because this is not about yesterday, this is not about today, this is about a very long-term tomorrow that we both are invested in. And I think what I must state here that I've been impressed by the ambassadors and especially Ambassador Arkan, whose personal zest, personality, and energy to add to this journey that we are going through. I think it is very, very important. So I think the other thing that is, I think I'm very clear is that I think Ambassador Arkan takes great effort to remind many people from his country, myself from my country, that many things we don't talk about every day, we don't read about, it's not so interesting for most people on social media. But these institutions that we're trying to plant seeds are very important for Singapore's future, not just for Kazakhstan, but Singapore's future. Singapore must necessarily be global, and the Central Asia, the Caucasus, Kazakhstan being a very important player in the region is important to the future of Singapore. And this is something that we have to find ways to to nurture and do our part. And therefore, events like this is very, very important. And finally, I would just like to say this for the young people, both of Singapore and Kazakhstan. We should be defined more by future collective interests. And although we come from two different countries, very unfamiliar with each other's culture, geography, and we don't wake up every day knowing that, you know, we have our own different gravitational pulls in the region. Kazakh has theirs, we have ours. I think today, as I sit here far away from home, I learned one very important lesson, that we have to be global in everything that we do. And the young generations must be clear that although, for example, the Kazakhstan, the Caucasus are far away from us, they are not irrelevant from us. They will be an important part of our lives if we want to become global. And therefore, all these things that we're doing to share stories with the young, importantly to tell them that they are not that far. They're actually very near to us. If they are far, it means we are not getting there to be ourselves global. This is the global village, indeed a small village. So on that note, I think I will just end by saying that I am quite sure that the next 30 years of Kazakhstan will be even more prosperous, more stable, more successful. But it won't be smooth sailing. There'll be a lot more challenges, more problems that we have to work together. For example, the COVID itself shows how much, whatever little we can do, whatever much we can do, although we are far away, we see we have done quite a lot of work to support one another in making sure that we can both live peacefully, and happily. So on that note, thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your words, and also for reminding the importance of being global today, which I think sometimes it's a message that is missed. I mean, it's very, very important. Thank you. I now would like to pass the floor to Associate Professor Bhaskar Nair. I say he's a visiting professor right now. He's actually in Nur Sultan. So thank you very much for joining us. Bhaskar, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Francisco. Congratulations to the ambassador to Kazakhstan. I will just cover briefly first in two broad areas: building a nation and the built environment. I think the two ambassadors have already covered quite extensively on how building a nation over the last 30 years. But however, in regards to the built environment, let me define what is built environment. It basically, built environment defines a city, a country. It's a visual perception of what is called built icons. Give an example. When I was in Capital Land, we built Raffles City, Shanghai in the early 2000s. It defined the built environment landscape. And then China itself saw it, and right now it's one of the best, most built environment in the world. Similarly, in Singapore, when we built environment, it refers to the Marina Bay Sands. It now defines the Singapore skyline. It puts it into context that building a nation is one facet, and the other facet is the built environment. Now, regarding Kazakhstan itself, over the last 30 years, I think the ambassadors have talked about President Nazarbayev building the cohesive nation, and people don't realize how multiracial, how multi-ethnic, how multilingual this society is. In fact, soon after declaring independence, there was so little confidence in the possibility of forming a nation out of a multiracial group. There was a mass exodus of your Germans, the Greeks, the Turks, the East Europeans, the Russians. But now we are looking at a country that's extremely stable, and whatever it is, the national identity, the ethnic, multilingual, multiracial issues are relatively stable. Then over the years, its borders were defined, and its neighbors are superpower ranking. It has the longest border with Russia. It's got a long and porous border with China. The US is far away, but it's a superpower. that's created many of the international institutions like the World Bank and IMF that matters to Kazakhstan. I mean, for example, World Bank funds many of the projects like the irrigation project in South Kazakhstan being done by one of the Singapore companies, which is part of Sumana Jurong, actually is doing several provinces clustered together there in terms of the irrigation. Then you have Turkey, which is active and often an assertive player in the region where people are of Turkic origin. So that's the building part of the nation part. In the first 30 years also, the most impressive built environment is the building of a capital out of a village near the Russian border. And we know right now it's 1 degree. I admire Andrea, who is out there in the warm Singapore climate. It's now 1 degree here. It's a harsh winter, and it's a challenge to human existence, actually. Astana, now renamed Nur Sultan, is an impressive, vibrant capital. I mean, Singaporeans have not visited that, should actually make a point to come over and see this capital city covering 722 square kilometers, which is about the size of Singapore, which is about 725.7 square kilometers. Singapore is one of the smallest country in the world. Kazakhstan is the 9th largest in the world. And Nur Sultan itself, over the 20 years, has grown from 33,000 people to 1 million people. And the official opening, being close to the Russian border, was actually one of the persons who were part of the officiating team was the Russian Prime Minister, Viktor Shomaydin. And Kazakhstan's built environment, especially Nur Sultan, is very impressive. As is already mentioned by the Ambassador Arkan, how wonderful and pretty and beautiful all the futuristic buildings are. Of course, with it comes the problems of modernity, the traffic jams, and the various other things. But nonetheless, from a built environment, it is very impressive. Now I go on to in 2019, when President Tokayev took over as a president, while the first president became the leader of the nation. To understand the dynamics for those who are not in Kazakhstan, it's the familiar to Singaporeans of a minister-mentor Lee Kuan Yew and a Goh Chok Tong relationship. So you still have to earn your spurs even as you are leading the country as a second leader. In the case of Goh Chok Tong, for example, he earned his spurs as a leader during a pandemic. We had SARS, the severe respiratory syndrome, in 2003, and he did well. And similarly, for example, now Kazakhstan is in the midst of a major pandemic itself. The whole world is in a major pandemic, and it has created havoc to the country's economy, the healthcare system, and the people's livelihood, as again mentioned by the Ambassador Arkan itself. And like every country, we read about COVID-19, its disruption, and the pandemic has also disrupted not only the international connectivity, and but also far-reaching changes that will, as the president himself mentioned, will affect for a long time, affecting daily lives and their livelihoods. But there are also positives. For example, the ambassador talked about the salaries of doctors and teachers. They were the lowest paid in this country. Now is being raised because they realized they were literally the front line in managing the growth of the nation. Doctors were very important. Public health is important. Personal hygiene were important. And the reform, the civil service are also in place simply because they suddenly realized the disjunctures that they all faced in implementing policies. So in a sense, in a perverse way, COVID-19 actually supported President Tokayev to become a strong leader. And he has turned out to be in his, if I used his 2 State of the Nation speeches in my course for the students itself. And one of the things is they all come back. If I move around in Kazakhstan, one very clear thing comes across. The present president is always out there doing things, meeting people. He's doing things, guiding the nation to win the hearts and minds of the people by his hands-on approach. Young Kazakhs, some of the former students I've met, present students I've met, and they all tell me that he is a hands-on leader, which is a very good sign. And he himself has framed the the next decade in the context of complexity, that it's not going to be easy, but there will be challenges in the midst of threats, and they must continuously improve and always move forward. So that's building the nation perspective under his leadership. Now I come on to the building the built environment under his leadership itself. And here I refer to a recently approved 30-year plan to build another city, which is about 50 kilometers long in the north-south corridor of the country. Now the length will be roughly the length of Singapore, which is 50 kilometers from east to west. And we are building a city like Singapore from in the Almaty region itself. The city was first conceived by President Nazarbayev, although it was a private sector initiative, but the president decided that to build a vibrant city in the south of the country. Now remember, Nur Sultan was built in the north of the country, which is closer to Russia. This city is going to be closer to China and other neighboring nations. The temperature is kinder. It's 10 degrees warmer than Kazakhstan. If it's 1 degree here, it'll be probably 10 to 11 degrees in Almaty region itself. This master plan, which covers an area of 1,118 square kilometers, imagine it to be like a bubble, was prepared by Singapore's Subhana Jurong. I happen to be a senior advisor at Subhana Jurong in between. In 2019, I took on that role, and I still hold that position on a contractual basis itself. Now, Subhana Jurong built a master plan. Subhana Jurong builds master plan globally. It builds master plan in China, in India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Africa, and so its DNA is to be a global infrastructure linked closely to the Chinese AIIB, which is the Chinese investment bank, then with Japanese, including JICA, Japanese infrastructure. We have worked together with Japanese firms in Indonesia. And in the case of Kazakhstan, the team was here last week, and I was with them meeting ministers and senior officials. And they signed a 30-year project to build this. Personally, I think it's more than 30 years. So going forward, there will be another city over the next 30 years, the next decade, next 3 decades. It is a proposed built environment of the future. And it's starting from an already vibrant commercial city of Almaty, which has a population of 2 million. Right now, in the case of Nur Sultan, it has gone from 33,000 to 1 million. But this one will be 2 million, and the projected growth of people in this area is meant to be 2.4 million residents added, with over 700,000 residential units, of which 67% will be condominiums. It expects to create tourism footfall of over 4.3 million tourists coming, of which 60% will be international. All these are part of the plans presented to the leadership. It was first presented to the private sector group, which is our partner, the Caspian Group. He was a former senator. The chairman then brought it up to the first president's attention, and then to the second president's attention, and he's been fully supported by the government. To get a feel of how it's fully supported, they've appointed ministers, 3 ministers, one also from the president's office, and also the governor of the AIFC, which is equivalent to our EDB, to be fully responsible for the success of this 30-year plan. So Singapore is actually contributing, therefore, in a sense, the future growth in Kazakhstan itself. We're talking not just of a place, it's increasing people, increasing tourism, increasing jobs. We're talking about creating jobs, about 2 million jobs in this area itself. And this area is already famous for existing recreational facilities like I think the world's second largest canyon, which is the Cherin Canyon. It's got a world famous ski resort, but it's not known to the world except to the Russians, Shimbolak. And some of the most beautiful lakes are also found in this region itself. So over the last 3 decades, trust and confidence must be built. But at the moment, the biggest problem based on my moving around is that still the trust and confidence in the government is not very strong. It is like a drawback. People still don't trust that the government will be looking after their interests. But I think going forward, we should see some changes as they go along. But it's an important facet that there be efforts to be made to ensure that trust and confidence in the government and what it's doing are also part and parcel of the government's effort itself. Now, I will stop here because there are a lot of things that I can talk about in the new city itself, but let's wait for questions to be asked. With that, Francisco, I end. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bhaskaran. This was a great overview, and I really like the built environment framework that you provided us. So thank you very much. I'm now giving the floor to Professor Eduardo Araral, who is an associate professor here at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, but currently enjoying the good weather of California at Stanford University. Eduardo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much to my good friend, Francesco. Good morning from California. It gives me a great pleasure to send my warmest greetings and felicitations to the Republic of Kazakhstan, to President Tokayev and his government, to Ambassador Arken Aristanov, and the embassy staff in Singapore, and of course to the friendly people of Kazakhstan on the occasion of the 30th anniversary of your republic. In 12 years out of those 30 years of Kazakhstan's independence, I was privileged to have traveled to Kazakhstan at least 17 times and to have worked in the country, starting with the Academy of Public Administration, helping build the NU Graduate School of Public Policy from scratch, training more than 700 Kazakh officials and students, contributing to the development of the Kazakh 2050 strategy, working with the Agency for Civil Service and many other government agencies, including with Chairman Kairat Kelembitov, who is now chairman of the Agency for Strategic Reforms. And I must say, in those 12 years that I've been to Kazakhstan, looking back, I must say that these very few newly independent countries can match what Kazakhstan has done in a very short period of time. And I say this not because I traveled to Kazakhstan. I make this as an academic, and I am not biased when I make this statement. So we all know the special relationship between Kazakhstan and Singapore. Ambassador Baharudin has already mentioned some of them, but please allow me to look back and trace this relationship and put my observation and conclusion in context. But I would allow, of course, the listeners and the students to make their own judgments as well. It was in 1993 when President Nazarbayev first met Mr. Lee Kuan Yew in Almaty to seek his advice for the newly independent republic. Mr. Lee even planted a tree in a park in Almaty to commemorate his visit. To the students listening tonight, you must go and visit this tree somewhere in Almaty. We all know Mr. Nazarbayev admired Mr. Lee for his strong leadership in building Singapore into a prosperous and internationally respected country. Like Singapore, the new Republic of Kazakhstan is faced with ethnic tensions, geopolitical risks, weak institutions, the problem of attracting investors and creating jobs and securing international recognition, among many others. These are the same problems that Singapore faced when it was a newly independent republic in 1965. Mr. Nazarbayev's admiration for Mr. Lee was documented in his 2007 book, The Kazakh Way, in which he paid tribute to Mr. Lee as one of his two role models as a leader, the other being Charles de Gaulle. In 2012, Mr. Nazarbayev conferred Kazakhstan's highest award to Mr. Lee for his contributions to Kazakhstan. So 23 years since they first met, one is tempted to ask, how does Mr. Nazarbayev compare with Mr. Lee in terms of building a modern state? Having followed and observed both leaders in so many years, I think it is fair to conclude that history will judge Mr. Nazarbayev generally in the same favorable light as Mr. Lee as far as state building is concerned. More generally, I would say it is fair to say that Mr. Nazarbayev belongs to the same mold of strong developmental leaders from East Asia, China, South Korea, Taiwan, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. Leaders who wielded state authority to build their economies into one of the most dynamic in the world. Needless to say, the Kazakh economy is fundamentally different from these East Asian economies, but their leaders are of the same mold in terms of their developmental orientation. On what basis did they arrive at this conclusion? So, as an academic, let me suggest three illustrative examples. First, like the leaders of East Asian economies, Mr. Nazarbayev invested heavily in education, the Bolashak program. I'm privileged to have known several of the chairmans and leaders of Bolashak scholarship. He sent the best students in Kazakhstan to go study abroad under state scholarships. Kazakhstan is one of the few resource-rich countries in the world that have invested heavily in foreign scholarships. This is perhaps what sets Kazakhstan apart from other post-Soviet and post-colonial countries. Number two, like Mr. Lee, Tun Razak of Malaysia and Suharto of Indonesia, Mr. Nazarbayev sought to unite the ethnically and religiously diverse countries. He has succeeded in uniting and holding together a large and ethnically diverse country such as Kazakhstan. And this cannot be said of many post-colonial or post-Soviet republics. Finally, like Mr. Lee, Mr. Nazarbayev was open-minded. He was visionary, he was ambitious, and he was pragmatic. Mr. Lee once said that 80% of what you see in Singapore were ideas that were borrowed and adopted from other countries. Kazakhstan is no different. Mr. Nazarbayev sought and welcomed advice from around the world. He embraced ambitious reforms, market liberalization, trade, financial, and monetary reforms, language reforms, vocational and higher educational reform, multilateralism and nuclear-free regime. As a peace broker in the region, he also pushed pension reforms, legal reforms, civil service reforms, establishing sovereign wealth fund, anti-corruption reforms, digital transformation, and including most recently constitutional reform and many other reforms. Very few leaders can match this kind of record of reforms in a very short period of time. Like the East Asian tiger economies, Kazakhstan sends its civil servants to study best practices around the world. Very few independent countries have been open to as much institutional reform in so short a time as Kazakhstan. Perhaps most importantly, unlike many newly independent countries, Kazakhstan has managed a peaceful transfer of power. And the new government by President Tokayev is as vigorous and committed in pursuing reforms as in the early days of the Republic. So these three examples serve to illustrate my main argument that Mr. Nazarbayev justifiably belongs to the same mold of developmental leaders from East Asia. Of course, I leave the final judgment to historians and academics, whether this is a fair or biased judgment, but in my view as an academic, the evidence will stand on its own. In fact, me and my colleagues from Nazarbayev University wrote a chapter of this in a book detailing the legacy of Mr. Nazarbayev. I think I will end my presentation there and we will proceed to the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ed, for your overview as well. Really a very complete picture we will be able to provide. I would like now to open up to questions. I remind all our dear participants to type your questions in the Q&A, and I will then read them. If you have a question specifically for one of the speakers, do please let me know. Otherwise, I will just share with our panel. Now, Ambassador Aristanov, if you don't mind, I will draw you in the panel because there might be questions for you as well.
Yes, question, yeah.
yeah. So actually, I have a first question, which start with thank you, Ambassador. But it was very early question, so I'm assuming is for Ambassador Aristanov. You mentioned the digital hub, right, as one of the priorities in Kazakhstan. Could you share a little more about the plans of Kazakhstan to be a central digital hub?
Yes. In his address, President Tokayev mentioned that Kazakhstan must become the digital hub in the Central Asia. And I want to explain what it means. The next few years, we calculate that we will need more than 100,000 IT specialists. And we don't have this amount of IT specialists in Kazakhstan. So government decided to provide 20,000 vouchers from the budget in order to train, to teach the new IT specialists. And especially during the COVID, everybody understands that without digitalization, the economy now cannot develop, and even the education process, medicine, telemedicine, and other issues are become on the front line. And the development of 5G, create the database, the processing center, and so on. It's very important. So the government decided to increase the export of IT services up to $500 million in 2025. And also, government decided to transfer the decision-making for the platform, how to say that, digital platform solutions, because we have in each minister's government agencies more than 300 separate programs, and sometimes they are not integrated. So first of all, we want to integrate them to have a processing data center in Kazakhstan, and we want to provide the global leading companies the opportunity to create the business in Kazakhstan. And we have announced that the Astana International Financial Services and English law allowed to the foreign investors to do business in Kazakhstan, and all these efforts will create the real digital hub in this area. So this is my short answering for the question. But also I want to support Professor Nain about ecosystem and the building of the surroundings, because during the COVID we understand that money, economy is not the solution for everything. You saw the sentiments from Europe, from Latin America, from Russia, from Kazakhstan, even in Singapore, about the first days of when there is no vaccine, and the fight for the vaccination, for the vaccine. And like yesterday, the General Secretary of United Nations, Mr. Guterres, said that this is the stupidity. It's not economy, but this is just stupidity of the policy and politics. And I want to say that nowadays, the question of education, the question of culture, and the question of civilization is on the front line. 10 years, 5 years ago, money, business, economy was on the front line. But now we understand that this is not enough. And that is why it's very important, especially for the young students, for young generation, to be more civilized, more culture educated, and more humanitarian educated. So this is my remarks.
Great, thank you very much, Ambassador. One thing that also is coming through the question is this issue of education. And actually, Bhaskaran, you mentioned education as an important pillar. Ambassador just mentioned digitalization, digital skills are one of the things that should be part of the future of education. Any other areas that you think would make education sort of future-proof, where investment should go, what kind of skills should be developed? If we look at education for the next, let's say just 10 years, because it's very hard to say 30.
Yeah, I mean, the crisis pointed out to Kazakhstan itself that the importance of digital and build a digital economy and the whole digitization of education itself. In fact, in the early days, they were working towards WhatsApp. So online education is now of greater interest. In my visit to AIFC last week, we were looking at all the things being introduced by them in regards to this digital economy. We also met the minister in charge of digitization. So there's a whole slew of things where money is being put to train talents. I think the government has realized the importance of training, the importance of lifelong training, the importance of, and it's very interesting, almost 5 times the governor of AIFC, Kairat Kalambetov, mentioned that we are looking to Singapore on all these issues, digitization, on the integration, I think that geopolitics, the language, that means all the arbitration. Singapore was used, everything they say literally, they follow Singapore things and all that. So the nexus between Singapore and Kazakhstan is actually increasing rather than decreasing. And the language of English, if you go to AFC, everyone spoke super English, including the ambassador's former First Secretary Nurlan is also there as part of the team. They are all within that focus itself. The stock exchange, going forward, there's a lot to be done with the stock exchange itself, because the listing of companies, especially going to privatize companies. So that over time, I think Singapore can play a role in that area. So basically, this whole concept of digitization, education, talent pool, that it's an ecosystem of people building structure is becoming increasingly of interest to the present president itself. Tokayev, I think, is very more engaged in this area than the first president. I think he knows, and he looks forward to the other countries. That's in addition to what Ambassador Arkan said.
Great, thank you very much. I'm getting a question from one of my former colleagues, Professor Pua Kai Hong, and he's pointing to the importance of the Kazakhstan and Singapore relationship, and both, very different societies, obviously, but also closely sort of destined to be linked together in a lot of common challenges. And I guess this may be a question for Ambassador Baharudin. Could you outline us some of the sort of potential successful joint venture or initiative between Kazakhstan and Singapore in the future, where this partnership is going, what the direction could be?
Well, I'll start with technology, for example, and only because for a small country like Singapore, and in the scheme of things, not in terms of geographical size, but in terms of population, Kazakhstan is also considered very small. And therefore, digitalization, technological innovation allows both Singapore and Kazakhstan to overcome many of the physical constraints that we may otherwise have to do trade and business. So technology allows us to overcome many of the impediments of being small. But to the question, I think they're very, other than what I've mentioned, there are some similarities between Singapore and Kazakhstan that we can work together, but there are many differences as well, and we are aware of. In fact, I think more people are aware of the differences that we have than the similarities. The differences are quite obvious. But here I would like to think about persuading people to think that in a global village, now that we're living in the future, take the case of education. It's easy to get a group of people to say, yes, digitalization is important, train them, let them do something, give them the skills. But under what context? Education must exist in a certain context. So if you grow up in a certain country, in a certain place, with a certain experience, you're not able to globalize because you cannot understand how people live and make choices. So for example, why is China able to do things that could find relevance and resonance with the rest of the world, even social behavior, to make consumer choices? It is because in my years in China, I've learned that many of them have gone to China, studied there, lived there before they come back. So they understand very well. So until and unless Singaporeans, Kazakhs, who want to do something, we understand the world, we are not able to go and make ourselves relevant to the world. And therefore, connecting ourselves with what is seen as a vastly different region, unfamiliar region, is one important connectivity that we must have. We may not be obvious, but it is important for us to be connected with what is otherwise unfamiliar, because it is to convert the unfamiliar to be familiar. Is that's the essential part of globalization. That's my simple response to my good friend Kaihu.
Great, thank you very much. I have a question from Tekla Lo. Maybe I put this to Ed because she's talking about water, and particularly the issue of critical water issue for drought. There's a UNEP recent paper that showed that the large proportion of world that will face these critical water issues. Anything that we can say about sort of public policy plans and strategies by Kazakhstan government to mitigate this challenge, and maybe things that can be learned from Singapore or done with Singapore on this issue?
Yeah, thank you, Francesco. In fact, one of my NU students wrote his master's thesis on this subject, especially the problem of water supply in Astana. As we've heard, the population of Astana has grown to about 1 million, and every time a city grows very fast, you're faced with water constraints. And of course, Astana does not have natural rivers or lakes. It depends on the melting of ice, and there's some. And if the growth of Astana continues, then it will eventually soon face a water problem. And of course, every winter, after winter, there's some kind of flooding that happens around the periphery of Astana because of these things. So with climate change, these are unique problems. These are problems that Astana will face. But of course, we also know that with climate change, northern cold countries would benefit from climate change. They become warmer. Kazakhstan would benefit from that, and hopefully it will open up agriculture. And as long as there's availability of water, especially in the south, with this new big city that is being planned, then there will be more opportunities for agriculture down south in Kazakhstan. But of course, we also know that many of Kazakhstan's freshwater resources come from other countries. So there's got to be a foreign relations component to this. It's not just about using technology. It's not just about that. But there are many practical examples that, in fact, we have hosted a few Kazakh officials who visited Singapore to look at urban water planning. So obviously, Kazakhstan does not have salt water, but technologies like water recycling in big cities, technologies like water conservation, managing the demand side of water would be very important examples as Kazakhstan cities would continue to grow. Jesco?
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I add something?
Please,
on
Ambassador.
water? I'll just
sure.
Bhaskaran here. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And then I have Ambassador.
Yeah. On water itself, I'll mention that the Subana Jurong team right now, the 120 people working in Kazakhstan focus purely on water management under an irrigation program paid for by the World Bank. So it's a major thing, and in a discussion with ministers last week, water was a big issue they talked about. And in the G4 city itself, you cannot function with, for example, having data centers operating there without water and electricity. So part and parcel of this whole discussion with the ministers and the Akims of that area would be water management, of which because the company works on hydropowers, irrigation, it is part and parcel of the need to build water management within Kazakhstan. So actually, what one major part of that new city will be water management. I thought just to add to that point.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Ambassador Aristanov, did you?
Yes,
Please.
I have some remarks. I recently wrote a book about the secrets of success of Singapore in Russian, and one chapter of this book is devoted to the water management in Singapore. And in Kazakhstan, we are looking for the experience of Singapore, because the culture of water consumption in Kazakhstan, in big cities and in the villages, is not so effective. The price is very, very cheap. And now we have a project together with the Temasek, and Temasek bought one of the Israeli company, Revulis, who is famous for the micro irrigation. So the micro irrigation process can increase the effectiveness more than 50% of water using and water consumption. And also the water cleaning, the second consumption of industrial water is very important. And the government now, I think that in the end of the year, it will be adopted probably with the help of consultants financed by the World Bank, the government program of management of water resources in big cities. And parallelly, the Ministry of Ecology and Ministry of Agriculture are developing this micro irrigation program. And of course, for Kazakhstan, these issues are very important. And you know, the problem with the Aral Sea, that many scientists are working how to return the water to Aral Sea. And this issue will be always in the public policy.
Thank you, Ambassador. I got a few more questions, but we're getting close to our wrap-up time, so I'm not sure I can squeeze all of them. But Ambassador Arkan, I think there are a few students listening to us and kind of asking, you know, when can we travel? So do you have any news on Singapore borders, opportunity for exchange students to restart soon? Anything that you can share with us?
I have good news that from December, the neighbor countries of Singapore are opening their borders. Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Japan. So definitely Singapore will follow this, and we're just waiting when the peak of the infections will go down. And for instance, now, Professor Nari, you know, in Kazakhstan now we have only 1,500 cases a day, and in Singapore it's 3,500. So now you are in the safer place in Kazakhstan than we are in Singapore. But in general, I think that, and today, for instance, in Straits Times, I saw the article that Singapore is trying to open in the end of the year the green line with US. So in general, I think that when the students will be vaccinated, and then they will come to Singapore and both to Kazakhstan. And in Kazakhstan, now if you are vaccinated, and if for Singaporeans even, again, they continue the no restrictions for the visa. So without visa, you can go again to Kazakhstan.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's the direction, and we'll hope that we go there. So thank you very much for sharing that good news.
Yeah, just affirm that it is true. It's safer to be in Kazakhstan.
Right. So I want to give the panelists an opportunity to share the final thoughts. I think in terms of questions, a couple of pointers again on future challenges, right? We talk about water. Obviously, sustainability is another big challenge out there. And I wonder if you're maybe in your wrap-up final thoughts, you can point to some, challenges, but also opportunity facing Kazakhstan in the coming decade. What you think are sort of top priority there should be as policymakers. And I wonder if we can go in kind of opposite order of the panelists and maybe start with Ed.
Thank you, Francesco. I'll just make it short. The Kazakh 2050 strategy was developed when President Nazarbayev decided to exit. So I think follow the Kazakh 2050 strategy, stay on course, and continue with the set of reforms. And I wish Kazakhstan all the best in the next 30, 100, 300 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Bhaskaran, you're muted.
I'll just mention the series of startup projects that are planned within. Things like, for example, a metro extension from Almaty to Kapchakai Lake. There's going to be a new international airport that's being closer to this Kapchakai Lake. There's a possibility of a focus on potable water that's going to be looked into. There's going to be an expansion of, say, the increase of solid waste. There's going to increase in power capacity. So in short, there are things being done between Singapore and Kazakhstan that are along these lines, especially in the agricultural lines. And I'm confident that we will see many more things going forward in the next 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhaskaran. Ambassador Baharudin.
I'll just touch briefly on challenges and opportunities. Kazakhstan, borders a huge power, which is Russia, which we in Singapore are less familiar than Kazakhstan, and that's going to be a permanent reality of life. But Kazakhstan also has a very close border neighbor with China, which is a huge emerging power, and therefore it has no choice but will be defined in the past and in the future by both these great powers. But whatever it is, if you compare Kazakhstan with Russia and China, it is going to be more and more integrated into this country, but it's going to be a much smaller player. At the same time, it is important for Kazakhstan also to be relevant to the rest of the world, not just defined by its neighbors. And when I say this, it's also Singapore. We cannot just be defined by our neighbors. We have to be necessarily be global. And therefore, I think Kazakhstan has taken the right approach of trying to seek out relationship lessons from all over the world. For example, Singapore, as we are in the middle of ASEAN, but our links with countries like as far as Israel and places like that, it's very unnatural to many people, but it's important to Singapore for our survival. And I think that's the kind of spirit that we must continue as the older generation to tell the younger people how important it is to be part of a global community for our own future.
Thank you, Ambassador. I want to give the final words to Ambassador Aristanov to wrap up our conversation and to add any final closing remarks he might have. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. And I want just to say that I agree that for the next 30 years, we have a bright future. And I believe for the young generation, young Kazakh educated generation, they have a freedom of thought, freedom and energy to realize their ideas. And thank you very much for the 30 independence of Kazakhstan. Congratulations. And thank you for the active participation in our roundtable, for the students, for the professors. Special thanks to our moderator, Francesca Mancini. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I want to thanks all our panelists for contributing to this conversation. And also thank you very much for all our participants who have contributed a question. I apologize if I couldn't pick up all of them, but I really appreciate it for sharing your thought and sharing your question with us. This has been a great honor for us to be able to co-celebrate the 30th anniversary of the independence of the Republic of Kazakhstan. So thank you to the Embassy of Kazakhstan in Singapore for this opportunity. Again, thanks a lot to my colleagues, Bhaskaran and Eduardo, to take the time to contribute with their knowledge. Thank you very much, Ambassador Bahrudin, for taking the time. And we know it's very early in the morning there, so thank you very much for being with us. And finally, to my colleagues at the Lee Kuan Yew School, our great event team who's been very professionally putting up this online conversation. Thank you very much, and we hope to stay connected in the future. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.